Welcome to the Quantum Health Connection podcast. My name is Heather Nielsen. I am here with Vanessa Baldwin, my incredible co-host. Today we have a two-part feature for you because we interviewed Jonathan Jarecki, who is a student at Davidson College. He's studying biology and neuroscience. He's on a PhD track, and he has so much enthusiasm and so much incredible knowledge and information that our podcast went long, so we're going to deliver that into two halves for you. In this first part, we basically, I really enjoyed this, Vanessa. Like, we got to know him as a person more, as a person who probably, I mentioned in the podcast, has the highest level of health that I've ever seen, and somebody that I know of who really had quite an amazing upbringing because his mother was privy to what it is that can allow us to be in our full health and have a high level of health. So he was able to avoid a lot of the so-called healthcare practices that actually really are toxic to us. So he shares all about what it's like to have grown up in his family, how it is for him to be in a college or university setting where he's really kind of the outlier, and the things that he knows and he studies in addition to the sort of, the curriculum that's the usual curriculum in this country. How he manages that and how he navigates all that. I just found it fascinating. Like, I love learning about people themselves as a person in addition to the content or the information they're going to share, but I just love that. How is it for you, Vanessa?
Oh yeah, no, I loved it. I love listening to Jonathan. It was amazing to hear his story and his life path and where he's come from and the beautiful upbringing that he's had. And yeah, I mean, honestly, probably, I mean, I don't know many people, like he literally out of what, two to three, what was it, 2,000 or 3,000 people, he was the only one in an audience that never had an antibiotic. So, I mean, like, that's amazing, like to have that. We don't know what true health is because of the fact that we've been so unfortunately poisoned from medical systems and from, toxins in the environment and unhealthy foods. Like, and he grew up in this a very different way than most of us have, and he's experiencing true health because of that. He doesn't have any chronic health issues, any mental health issues, nothing. He's not suffering with anything. And, this is a true testament to epigenetics and the real truth of that. Your genes are not your destiny. And he said, in the history of my family, there are chronic diseases that he probably won't have because he's not polluting his body with all of these things, and he's living a really holistic natural lifestyle that promotes health and well-being. And now he's sharing that with other people, and I think that's a beautiful gift. And he's a real big inspiration, of what we should aspire to be like. And the younger that we can do that, the better. So he's an inspiration to this younger generation. And I also really, really love that. And I love what he's studying. And I know that his future is going to be really bright and he's going to do a lot of really great things in this world. So I'm honored to just know him here in this little small moment because I know things are going to be big for him in the future with, where he's already at 20 years old, right? Like, it's just,
I
working,
know, it's
he's
amazing. Like,
talking,
I'm
right?
like,
Yeah.
he's presents more like he's 30 years old. I mean, he's very mature.
Right. And he's, yeah, very. And he's all like, he invited Jerry Pollock to his school, right? And like, I mean, like he's
So
talking to
cool, yeah.
Scott Zimmerman and, I mean, all of these amazing people in the light space. I can see collaborations in the future. He has a very scientific mind. I'm really excited to see where it goes. So we really hope you enjoyed part one. We're going to, like I said, Heather said, we're splitting this up into two episodes just because we want it to be digestible for you. So enjoy part one and please make sure to stay tuned for part two because in part two he really talks about the science of sunlight and a lot of really, really deep, rich science information that I think that this community will really, really enjoy. So remember to rate and review the podcast. We really appreciate that, and share it with people who need to hear this information, who will be inspired by this episode. So we really hope you guys enjoy this one.
Welcome to the Quantum Health Connection podcast. My name is Heather Nielsen, and I am here with my incredible co-host, Vanessa Baldwin. And today we have a breath of fresh air. We have who calls himself an undergraduate student. I think he's just like a beacon of health, probably the healthiest person we've ever had on our podcast. Let's be honest. Vanessa, Jonathan Jarecki, welcome to the Quantum Health Connection.
Thank you guys for having me on. I'm excited for our conversation. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, we're excited to have a really deep conversation with you about all things health and wellness, about light, about mitochondria, all the things. And I really want you to share your personal story of how you got to where you are. Because what, you're 20 years old and you are a wealth of information when it comes to circadian biology and light and lots of other things in the health and wellness space. So I'm just like, how at 20 years old have you been able to get to this space? Because I didn't learn this information until what I was like, I had a chronic illness, like until
Yeah.
I was like on my
Yeah.
deathbed, right? Then I had to learn this information. But you have been blessed to know this information at such a young age. So tell us your story of how you got here.
Yeah. So I was raised in a holistic household. We focused a lot on prevention. Credit to my mom. She raised four children. I'm the youngest. I have three older siblings.
Mhm.
Sort of in this idea that your lifestyle has a direct impact on your both current health, but also long-term health. And so she had some big transformations in her life. Her mom had congenital heart failure. And she was given 6 months to live by the doctors. And my mom met this guy named John Galamaga, who now he's been in the health space for well over 40 years. So he's very, very deep into this. And my mom had him basically transform my grandma's life. Did a complete 180 on her lifestyle and gave her 9 more years to live when the doctor said six months. So my mom saw that and was like pretty astonished. And then my dad, when my parents met, my dad was on high levels of Dilantin, which is a epilepsy medication. So he was on 400 milligrams of Dilantin to prevent any seizures. And he was also like super super overweight. And so my mom had John come into his life and intervene in his lifestyle and sort of again did a 180 on his lifestyle.
Mhm.
And he lost 60 pounds in a matter of a few months. So like very fast, weight loss journey there, and then went completely off of Dilantin. So went from 400 milligrams to 0 milligrams of Dilantin with no seizures or nothing. So my mom saw both of those things and was like, okay, I'm gonna listen to what John has to say to raise my children. And so, she raised all four of her children sort of in this way. And me sort of the strongest, in sense of, she just kept building knowledge and building knowledge. So as you keep building knowledge in this space, you keep implementing new things, and you sort of progress on the journey there. So, when she had me, I was a surprise child, and she, my oldest siblings, 20 years old. So I've seen sort of how this lifestyle has a effect on all ages, including myself when I was young, and then my mom's 61, and she's the healthiest 61-year-old I've never known. And she raised us in this environment where we never went to go see like a doctor, or I've been to the doctor 18 times in my life, and that was just for the yearly checkup that's like required by my school, my school growing up. But he checked my ears, checked my eyes, throat, whatever, like all good, and I leave. And so, that was sort of my experience with doctors. And, we were sort of the belief it's like, the body has the innate capacity to heal. And if you add, pharmaceutical drugs to your body, then you're going to limit that innate capacity to heal. And so, we never really, we never turned to any pharmaceutical. I've never had a pharmaceutical drug in my life. Never had an antibiotic. We were talking about this before. I was, I'll say it again here for the listeners, but I was at a health conference, Eudaimonia, where Mark Hyman was speaking on stage. My brother and I were there together, sitting next to each other. And Mark, in a crowd of like 2 or 3 thousand people, he asked, "Raise your hand if you've never had an antibiotic." And this is 2, 3 thousand people who are in the health space, so they're very well aware of the effects of antibiotics and everything. And my brother and I were the only two people who raised their hands in a crowd of 2,000, 3,000 people, which is crazy.
It's
And so
crazy. It's crazy how
yeah,
much they're used, not to interrupt you, how much
yeah,
they're used and
yeah,
abused, right? Unfortunately, or given out like candy, and how we don't realize as a society that we're taking a short-term gain for a long-term loss. And I want to
yep.
ask you, and I'm sure I know the answer already, but Jonathan, do you have any chronic health issues that you struggle with or anything like
No.
that? I'm just curious, right?
No, no, I don't, and very blessed to have never had any big, health effects. The only, growing up, we would get under the weather, and by that I mean, we would have a fever, maybe a sore throat, and even that would last 48 hours maximum. We would, if we had a fever, my mom let the fever go, and we would do different modalities to
Yeah.
help the
Yeah.
fever and not suppress it. because there's a great paper on this. I publish it all the time. I don't I reference it all the time. I don't remember the title of it, but people go search my Instagram, they'll find it. But essentially, it's a peer reviewed published paper where they're basically talking about sort of how we should not be suppressing fevers, because the fever is your body's sort of defense mechanism against whatever is going on. And so with the fever is very important. So we would do different modalities, like I have an infrared sauna in my house, and we would go in the infrared sauna. We would do Epsom salt baths. We would do essential oils. Drinks lots of water, hot water, and lemon, and all these different things that would just sort of aid in that healing process. So, my mom always says we had all of her children had near perfect attendance in school, never had an ear infection, never had a headache or like I mentioned that on my Instagram. Someone messaged me. They're like, "So you don't know what a headache feels like?" I'm like, "No, I
Oh
don't."
my God, that's kind of amazing.
It's
Yeah,
amazing and so inspiring because
It really is.
there's so many kids now who are compromised. So I think you're just such an inspiration and give people hope that it's possible, to raise
yeah.
healthy kids, right? And also
Yeah.
regarding the fever, it's talked about in homeopathic circles that you literally up level your intelligence. Like it actually supercharges your brain
Mm.
somehow. Isn't that right, Vanessa? And
Yeah.
so you're gonna be like, you're gonna be just be like oodles and oodles of smartness. And
Yeah.
so I bet people also get a little bit of jealousy. They're like, oh, well, you had everything perfect, right? And like I was saying before we started recording, like I wasn't breastfed, want. So it's like all these things we wish we would have had.
Yeah.
You embody all that, which is so fabulous. It's just so
Yeah.
fabulous.
Yeah. And like I've seen, growing up sort of looking at, my health outcomes, my siblings' health outcomes, my mom's health outcomes and everything compared to, the standard American and like my peers and everything. And, I don't say this to like brag or anything, but it's just sort of just an encouragement for someone. It's like, we don't need to be burdened with these chronic diseases, but also just like short term, these sort of unhealthy, characteristics that a lot of people have when having headaches all the time and things like that. Like we don't need that. And also this isn't to, like blame anyone. I think it's the big thing is like people just don't know, right? Like for instance, like my mom would have never known any of this stuff if it wasn't for John telling her about it. She would have put her kids on the standard American lifestyle. So it's not like it just that the system that we're sort of put in sort of just allows for that to be the easy way out and sort of the standard and it's the norm. And like my mom when she was raising us, like the doctors scared her for being like you're doing some such terrible thing for your child for not giving them this medication or not giving them this pharmaceutical drug or whatever it may be. And
Well, we
so
can say the word jabs too. You didn't have
jabs, yeah,
jabs,
there we go.
like you didn't
Yeah,
have that. And
exactly.
honestly, we know, like as a homeopath, like pharmaceutical use, suppression of the immune system through jabs is one of the reasons why our children are struggling with such chronic, I forget headaches. I mean, we're
Yeah,
talking about autism, we're talking
yeah, yeah,
about
yeah.
anxiety, depression, we're talking about big things here that kids are
Hmm.
struggling with. And it's due to our extreme and overuse of suppression of the immune system through all these medications. And of course, our lifestyle is why we're dealing, like the way that we're living and raising our children is why they're suffering so much.
Yeah.
And again, no shame or blame. Like I did all those same things because I didn't know, like I said, till my own health failed. And then I
Hmm.
was like, oh, I have to change things. And then I'm trying to change teenagers who don't really want to change, you know? So then they're like set in their ways, which is another topic of conversation I want to bring in. But it brings up the thought of like epigenetics, of course, right? Like genetics are not your destiny. Like you do have the power to change. And that's so empowering, right?
Hmm.
It's so
Yeah.
empowering that you can reverse chronic disease when things are bad, or you can prevent them by living a lifestyle like you do, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and it really it's one thing that came to mind when you're talking about genetics and things. It's like, when we tell people like, oh, your mom had this, so you're bound to get it because of your
Yep.
genetics. It's like that one that's so disempowering, right? And also just like so untrue. It's like we really understand this, epigenetic landscape that we have tons of research on. I took an epigenetics class in my last not this past year, the year before my freshman fall where our environment has a huge play in our sort of one on our epigenetics, right? And that just determines what genes are transcribed and translated. And so if we just focus on genes, well, that doesn't really matter if we're not focusing on or what genes are transcribed and translated, and that all has to do with epigenetics, which is controlled absolutely by our environment. So my like my family, I look back at, my dad's side on and his parents and my mom's parents. It's like, looking back generationally, like we have very unhealthy sort of, a lot of my grandparents were burdened with many chronic diseases and died from chronic diseases. And it's like, but my mom, she's 61. She doesn't have any chronic, no chronic disease at all. She has no disease at all. So it's like these, it is very important to like empower people. It's like your lifestyle is really the big player here. Obviously, genes have a say in stuff, but the lifestyle is what pulls the trigger. And so if we can keep the lifestyle sort of aligned with how the body is meant to live under, then we can really, stop these chronic diseases. I mean, even in the standard establishment, there was a paper published in Nature. I did a presentation on it, and I was in a intro to epidemiology public health class, did a presentation on this where, the sort of the stat that they came up with, they were looking at preventable, how much of chronic disease, how much of cancer is preventable. And their number was 40% of cancer is absolutely preventable. And I think it's much higher than that. But even if we take 40%, I mean, like that's what the standard, medical sort of establishment is saying.
Huge.
Even 40% is huge, right? I mean, I can almost guarantee it's way, way more than that. But 40% is huge. Even if if we go more than that, it's crazy. So, lifestyle has a huge, huge impact. And, I think that's just something that we need to sort of teach people and sort of get that idea across more broadly. And, I think more people are waking up to it a little bit. So, which is great. Absolutely amazing to see. And I think if we keep putting the information in the hands of the individual, then we can really start seeing change. Hopefully.
Jonathan, I want to talk about sun, and I know you have a lot of knowledge around these areas and so regarding that though, how do you manage like the cognitive dissonance between what you're experiencing in the university setting with,
Yeah.
so-called traditional, all that kind of stuff, and then what kind of responses do you get from your peers?
Yeah, that's great. So, I go to Davidson College. It's a super small school. So it's only 2,000, less than 2,000 students, and it's
Wow.
only undergrad, so no graduate program. So super small class sizes. One of the reasons why I picked it, I wanted a really small college and college experience. The class sizes, my largest class I've ever been in at Davidson is like 30 students, and average is like 15 or something like that. So super small class sizes. So I think that sort of differentiates us, and that sort of allows, from my experience, it's actually allowed people to be much more open mind, because you don't want to have enemies out of a super small school, and
No.
when you see, I see everyone's face every single day. So now here I'll give examples so you can sort of get a little better understanding. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with Gerald Pollack.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, out of University of Washington, wrote the book Fourth Phase of Water and all the water research he's done. So I invited him to campus to speak as a part of the Free Speech Alliance. We have a club on campus called the Free Speech Alliance, where, sorry, I know the video just paused. There we go.
You're good.
Club on campus called the Free Speech Alliance, and where we invite speakers to talk on whatever topic it is, as long as a topic which is not conventionally talked about, essentially, and just sharing their views on things. So I invited Gerald Pollack to campus, and we had a great turnout. It was 80 students, which is huge for Davidson sort of event. So it was really awesome. We had students, we had some professors there, but I made posters for this event, and it was the title of the poster was "Everything You Learned in Biology is Wrong." So very, very
That got their
provocative.
attention, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
love
it got a lot of that plus Chick-fil-A, unfortunately. Um, that I
It
gotta
makes me
get
think
people.
of like when you wrote that everything in biology you learned was wrong. It's like I used to be a special ed teacher before I got chronically ill, and I was like, how do I talk about the three phases of matter? I'm like, this is like I can't even do this anymore. Like
Yeah.
when I learned this, like as I was debating on going back to being a teacher, and I was like, I
Mhm.
like moral and ethically can't do this. Like this is
Yeah.
not even correct.
Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah, so we had, it was a great turnout. So everything you learn in biology wrong was the poster. I went to, I'm a bio major, neuroscience minor. I went to the chair of the bio department because I was wondering, hey, maybe they'll support this event. And maybe, contribute to some money for food or whatever it may be. And went to the chair of the bio department. Great guy. I've had 2 classes with him now. He's actually my advisor because I just love him so much. And
Mhm.
I'm sitting down with him. I'm like prepping him for the big reveal of my poster, and I shared the poster with him, and he starts laughing, but like a good laugh. It's like, oh, that's like one that's funny just because like, all right, this is kind of crazy, but also like, huh, interesting. Like, let me hear about what this dude has to say. They ended up helping to fund the event, which was awesome. Yeah, the bio department at Davidson, which with a poster that says everything you learn in biology is wrong. But that I think that's sort of the really nice thing about sort of this small, it's a liberal arts school, so we're mandatory to take classes in all different departments, so philosophy and language and history and all these, the broad sort of educational foundation we're meant to get here, and also like freedom of speech and sharing different perspectives, and that's sort of the idea of a liberal arts education, which I think is really great. And so having Jerry come to speak was super awesome. But I think it just talks
Cool.
to sort of the environment that Davidson is, and obviously bigger schools, it's probably not going to be like that. You're going to have obviously a lot more pushback for things like that. But I have conversations with my friends about this stuff all the time. I have vaccine conversations with my friends all the time, and I
Cool.
think so. I always come in with the perspective of I could be 100% wrong and you can be 100% wrong. And I always come with that perspective. And I think that helps the conversations with people who have different perspectives, because
Well,
you're
right
not
away, you're creating a bridge for emotional safety. So you're
exactly.
not coming in with I'm right, adversarial. So this is brilliant. Good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's really important, because I think a lot of us in the space can be like, "Oh no, we have the answers. Like we are 100% correct. So I'm going to preach to everybody that I'm correct and they're wrong and they need to listen to me." Which I think is not the best way to do it.
Mhm.
And I think if we can come, and I've experienced this with talking with my friends. I mean, no, I went to high school. I wasn't homeschooled or anything growing up, so I went to high school. It was around kids, with obviously the standard sort of opinion on health, especially, but on all different topics, and I've been in that environment my whole life, and it can definitely be hard at times, in the sense of, like, it is nice to have people who have similar beliefs with you, and like having friends that have similar beliefs, which is very hard to find. But at least for me, with going to college, my experience, I found some friends who agree with me on some level. Obviously, I always say, like, I never want to agree with someone on every single thing. Like, I don't think that I think we should always, I love the quote here, where it's basically uh I don't know if I can't remember it for line, but essentially it's like, take what you think is useful, discard what is useless. I think this is actually the exact quote. Take what is useful, discard what is useless, and add what is specifically your own. And I think that's what it's all about, especially in the health space. You're never
Mhm.
going to find someone that you agree with every single point that they have to say, and that's totally okay.
Mhm.
And again, and that's just in life in general, right? So we should still be friends with people who disagree with us, and that's the only way we can get them to start thinking. Like, if we believe our way is like the right way and like the best way for somebody, right? Well, then we want them to hear it, and I think the best way that we can get them to hear it is to sort of come in that approach. So that's how I've taken it. It's really worked wonders for me. And you know what, guys? I know this camera. I'm gonna
That's
go to
okay.
the.
It doesn't affect the audio, so that's fine.
Yeah, you're good. Don't worry.
This camera
Don't.
should be
Plus,
on.
also, we don't want to come from a place of fear, because if we're so vehement
Yeah.
about our own position, if we're so, aggressive about it, that's because we don't trust. And so that just makes people, they sense that, and then they're not going to be receptive. So you have such a really beautiful strategy and,
Yeah.
and a supportive way of, connecting with people about it. So I bet you your peers are a lot more receptive to you than if you came in with a chip on your shoulder, right?
Exactly, exactly. And I think that, that's sort of how I've experienced it. And what's been great about this is I've gotten a lot of my friends to like start maybe shifting their perspective, or starting to at least question stuff. So I think that's really the name of the game. I'll say one other thing around this, and that is, so in the classroom, obviously, I'm sitting there, I'm listening to my professor, speak and whatever they have to say. And a lot of times, they're pulling from the textbook, which I think we can agree on is the vast majority of the textbook is probably either absolutely wrong, or maybe not entirely, the vast majority of it's probably wrong. I'll just say that. And we don't know which majority is wrong, which majority is right, if any of it is even right. But that's to say, I go in it still questioning stuff. So not taking what the professor is saying, not taking what the not taking what the textbook is saying as absolute truth, because again, like, we don't know absolute truth, and that's the whole name of the game in science. It's like we're trying to get to that truth. We're trying to figure out these mechanisms. But if we are so set in stone on some particular thing, well, then if that's wrong, our idea of that, if that's wrong, well, then we're never going to be able to find what's actually true. So this goes, I'll bring this back to Gerald Pollack. And one of the reasons how I actually discovered him was because of his earlier research with muscle and muscle contraction. And, in any entry level bio class, you learn about how muscles contracted. We learned about the sliding filament theory. You have actin and myosin, and the actin head pulls on the myosin, and you have a muscle contraction via this mechanism. You learn about this theory in all bio classes. I learned it in my high school. I learned it at Davidson, and it's in every single textbook that there is. Every bio textbook, sliding filament theory, and you learn it in the sense of it is the like only theory, and like this is like we know we've discovered how muscles contract, and it very well may be absolutely correct. I don't know. It may well be correct, but I, discovered via my own, I don't even know how I stumbled upon it, but I stumbled upon it that Gerald Pollack, he had a completely different theory about how muscles contract. Very fundamental, right? And I think it's just, and when I first heard that, I was like, there's another theory about how muscles contract. I remember like in high school, I was mentioning this to, I don't know if it was either my anatomy teacher, bio professor or something, but it was like they didn't even know. So it's like they're just reading the textbook, so it's not their fault or anything. But it's just this sort of establishment that has been created where, we don't even give the students the opportunity to be like, oh, guys, all right, we're going to learn about this topic, but there is also like this other theory that's out there. Like, we're not going to really discuss it, but no, it's not even, there's not even that. Like, even that would be great. Even if we said like, oh, there is another theory, it would be awesome. But we're just set in stone on our ways, and unfortunately, that sort of that dwindles down into so many things in science, but it goes into medicine as well. So I think what I also love, I love the classroom environment so much for many different reasons. Obviously, I don't agree with it all, but I love being in it. And the reason why I love being in it is because I've seen like I can have an impact on how people think simply by having a different perspective and sharing that perspective and not being afraid to share the perspective. Because I think, that's the other thing. It's like, all right, if we have these perspectives and if we want people to at least hear the perspectives, well, we got to be sharing the perspective for them to hear it. So that's another thing, is we can't be scared to like share these things. So, you know, I I share everything in the classroom, and I'll also be the student that like raises their hand and asks like a difficult question that maybe the professor doesn't know, which is totally okay.
Yeah.
And I've actually experienced where like they don't know, and then maybe like the next day, like they go do some research and they come back to me with some answer, whatever it is. So I think that's
Look at
really
all
like,
the gifts you're giving these professors so they don't get stodgy and old and stuffy and they don't think that there's no other way to
yeah.
see things. So you're giving them so much. I just love that.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to how sort of science has made itself be, and that is very specialized. So, like a long time ago, scientists were very generalists. So they were really studying a ton of different things. Um,
Mm.
like for instance, I believe it was Albert St. Georgi who discovered vitamin C. He was a
Mhm.
big pioneer in like water, and it was talking with like Gilbert Lang, who is sort of who Gerald Pollack, takes a lot from. And so he was sort of in different spaces as well. So like a lot of these scientists back in the day were very generalists. Now we have come, like, let me just focus right now on research. In research and scientists who are conducting research, they're very specialized in their one little thing. And that sort of puts them in a siloed where then they only know what they know. They don't even understand other things because they're just so focused on their one. And like that's not to say we should completely disregard that and like get rid of that, because it obviously has made us learn more and faster and sort of
Mhm.
more in depth. But that's to say, like, so for instance, I've shared some like just fundamental, like Glenn Jeffries papers out of University College London about how light interacts with mitochondria. I've shared that with some of my professors. They have it in their office. And I share it with them, and like they read it, and we've had like discussions about it. But it's like, okay, like, so what? Like, there's not, only
But
because
that
like
has impact on how we're living our lives on day in and day
exactly,
out
right.
of like what we're doing, right? Which light we're under is actually impacting our mitochondria, which is affecting our energy production and our exclusion zone water. It's like we should
Yep,
care about that because that's
exactly.
that's like everything. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
love
but
that.
but
I love
unfortunately,
you
it's like
sharing.
since they're so specialized, it's like, all right, they see it, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, cool, but it's like, well, like, what's the relevance? Like, I
Because
don't get the relevancy.
They can't see the big picture, so they're
yeah, I was just gonna say
too
that.
myopic, right? And they're
Yeah.
just tunnel vision, so that's really not
Yeah.
good.
And this then has gone straight into medicine as well. We have these
I,
specialties in medicine, and
yep.
like, we can talk about this, but like with dermatologists, like dermatologists have become so specialized to just the skin. Like, how can we prevent skin cancer at all costs? When you're a medical doctor, and the first thing is do no harm, and if your motto is to do no harm, then you should be encouraging people to do things in their life that prevents the most harm. So their whole thing is like get away from the sun to prevent as much skin cancer. But they're not looking at all the body of literature that shows if you get more sun exposure, you reduce your risk of all-cause mortality, you reduce your risk of
Yep.
cardiovascular disease, the leading cause of death in the United States, and you reduce your risk of non-cancer cancers. So they're just focusing on skin cancer, which is one little aspect, when they're not seeing this broader picture of things, which is really, really important to see. So I think that's really where, like, I think we sort of put ourselves in these specialties that have really not have probably done maybe probably more, yeah, I would say definitely more harm than good in the long term, because it definitely
Yeah.
has done some good in the realm of learning more in science, but it's done so much harm as well.
Yeah, because if you're chronically ill and you're dealing with different things, you're going to see like five different doctors, right? Instead of just seeing one who can support you and look at the whole big picture. Like I went through that. I was seeing the endocrinologist and I was seeing the urologist and I was seeing the gynecologist and I was like, and it was like, and oh, and so another and a psychologist, and none of them are talking to each other about what's really happening in my body or what medications they want to give me or any of these things. Like there's no communication. So when we silo the body like that, that really becomes a problem because
Yeah.
the body is one system and all of those things are actually connected. So that's where I think that we really make the error there. Because we, and even in science, like we need to be chatting with each other. Like it's good because that research does get really fully researched, but that information then needs to be brought in. Like, how does this connect to this? Because
Mhm.
that's where we really find the growth. And I was thinking, like, our truth always evolves based on our own level of understanding. So what is true is always going to evolve based on our level of understanding and what we know in our lives, right? So your professors, like they're like, it's like not important to them because they're like, well, because they don't have a like greater understanding of that bigger picture, I think is what it is, right? Is that my thoughts?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, totally agree there. And that's the thing. It's like if we can get more broad looking, if we can see the bigger picture of things, I think that's going to have tremendous value. I mean, we'll talk about light, but just one example that's related to light. It's like I don't know if you guys are probably familiar with some of these guys, but we have Scott Zimmerman,
Yeah.
we have Glenn Jeffrey, Roger Swelt, and Bob Fosbury, who are these scientists, and they're different sort of areas of research. Roger Swelt's a quadruple board certified physician working in the hospital. Glenn Jeffrey is a wet lab researcher. Scott Zimmerman is a optics engineer, and then Bob Fosbury is an astrophysicist. So people who you would never expect to like sort of come together, they're now coming together and seeing their own sort of silos blend together, and then sort of elevating their understanding of things because they're sort of
Beautiful.
getting these different perspectives. They're coming out with a paper pretty soon where they're sort of synthesizing. All four of them are coming out with a paper soon where they're sort of synthesizing sort of the area of research on light mitochondria interaction and coming with this new uh, sort of hypothesis around how light even interacts with our mitochondria, which hasn't been fully published yet. But it's like that's really the name of the game here, is like we need to sort of start talking between silos and start and that's how we're going to sort of progress in science and medicine and health.
I can't wait to read that. That sounds really, really intriguing.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, what I also want to know is I apologize, another personal question, but I mean,
You're good.
I don't assume you're on the pre med track. You probably talk about this in your podcast and on your socials. So, but for our listeners, like, what are you going to do with yourself? Like, where are you going? What's your mission? Where do you
Yeah,
see
yeah, yeah.
yourself? Because obviously, going into tradition like MD path would not quite fit your,
Yeah.
vibe. But so, where are you going?
Yeah, well, this is a great question. Well, I don't know if you guys saw, but I was on the pre-med track up
Yes, I
until
did. I knew
around
that.
yeah, so up until around 3 months ago is when I quit.
Oh, I think I did see that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I made a video about it, but I was sort of the reason why I wanted to go pre-med. One, I love learning. I would love to learn just more about the human body. I was looking at some med schools, looking at the curriculum, and besides the pharmacology aspect of it, there's a lot that I would be really intrigued about learning and learning about the human body and how the human body works. My favorite class in high school was anatomy, so I sort of was intrigued by that. The other
Mhm.
idea of me, being sort of this doctor that has a different perspective in the system, I think would sort of be able to like shine a light on the system. I found that like that would be awesome to do. So that was sort of why I wanted to go pre-med. Up until 3 months ago, I realized that there was a logistical issue with the vaccines. So, up until now, like I've
Oh,
given,
so you would have had to go through with that in
yeah,
order to become a medical doctor.
Probably,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
probably,
yeah,
that makes
Vanessa.
sense.
yeah,
And I was also thinking, Jonathan, as you were talking, the other thing is like you're going to want to spend more than what, 7 minutes with your clients. So, you also that might be also a problem. So,
yeah,
Or he
yeah.
could go into he could go into research. Look,
oh,
Yeah,
that's true
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I'll get to in a second here. But I found this logistical problem because before this, I would my lower school, high school, college, I have an exemption for immunizations, and I'd give that
Good.
exemption to be totally fine, like all
Good.
good. I thought the same thing for med school until I started talking with medical doctors who like aligned on my beliefs, and they were like, no. And then I started digging into it, and I would probably be able to get accepted into a med school. Is from what I understand, I would be able to get accepted, but I would not. I would have zero guarantee of being able to do rotations, which is the second, the last 2 years of med school. AKA, wouldn't have any guarantee of graduating, and probably would not even be able to do rotations in the first place because they probably wouldn't allow it. So that was a logistical barrier there. And then,
Yeah, but that's standing in your own like integrity and what you
yeah,
believe as a person, and
yeah,
that is like is what's really important to
yeah,
me, and all that's huge. I'm
yeah,
very commend
yeah,
you.
yeah,
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 why go all these years without being polluted and then now I'm gonna do no. No.
Yeah, no,
yeah,
no,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm not. Yeah, I would never. I never plan on getting a vaccine.
No. No,
So
absolutely not.
I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna go down on that. So, but anyways, so that was sort of the logistical barrier. And then, I also started thinking, like, like I never went to the doctor growing up. I was very, I don't want to use, for lack of better words, like, I wasn't against doctors, but it just wasn't something my family did. Like, we didn't go to doctors. It wasn't a thing we would do. So it was sort of, ironic that like I would be wanting to even go
Yeah,
to,
right.
um,
That's true.
but yeah, so anyway, so quit the pre-med track, and I want to, as of now, my plan is to do research. I love reading paper. I read papers for fun. I mean, that's how I started Instagram and like started sharing stuff on Instagram. It was like I was just reading the papers for fun anyway, so I wanted to share it with people. And
Nice.
and that's really I love it so much. I love the research aspect. I think there's so much more sort of leeway in terms of like what you can share and what you can study in the research space rather than in being a medical doctor. You have to sort of be conformed to how the medical system does things. And there's obviously sort of the science system that also does their things that I tend to have some disagreements with in just like fundamental stuff. And this sort of would get back to like Gerald Pollack's research and things like that. But I think there's a lot more leeway in what you can study. And
Yeah.
there's some amazing labs like out there doing great stuff. So that's sort of my plan now is to pursue research. I'll be doing research during my undergrad next year with my professor. Will be some interesting research, not about light, but it will be on how environmental factors impact different aspects of health. So it'll be
I love
cool.
that.
And then long term, I want to pursue a PhD, and then I've sort of played with the idea of potentially becoming a professor. Like I said, I love the classroom environment. I think it could be so cool to have that influence on students and sort of be the professor that I wish like I had. Although, I have amazing professors. Don't get me wrong.
Mm.
Like my professors have been absolutely the best. I love them so much, and I talk with them all the time on different stuff.
Yeah, but they
And
may not be able to challenge you in the way that you need to be challenged or provide the
sure,
setting where you're focused on the material, the subject you want to focus on,
sure,
right?
sure, sure. Yeah,
Are you
exactly.
looking towards working with Pollock? Are you looking towards working with Zimmerman and crew? Or where do you want to go?
I don't know yet. There's a lot of different opportunities.
Mm.
We'll
How
see. We'll see.
exciting.
I really want to be back in Florida. I want to stay in Florida long term. So just
Mm.
be near the sun. So probably try to find. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But yeah, want to pursue research long term, and then also science communication because I think that's key. I think that's what we need more good science communication on social media. I think that I mean I know it's helped so many people. It's helped me. It's helped tons of people just on their health journey and then on just their learning journey as well. So I think that's super valuable, and I want to definitely continue sharing the science, sharing what I love, and hopefully helping people out there. But yeah, that's sort of the long term goals that I have.
Thank you.
Whatever you decide to do, it's going to be great. So I'm excited to see where you go. Like really, honestly, it's amazing. So we've been like hinting about chatting about light little bit. So how did you start like learning about light? Because I know like it sounded like your mom was health and nutrition and knew a lot about healing and exercise and like not to suppress things. Like there was a lot of that. But did you grow up with light as a part of your life? Like and circadian biology and grounding and all, did she have non-native EMFs?
So
Were these things that you knew about as a kid, or I did that something that came in later for you?
yeah, so we were definitely not afraid of the sun. My mom's Italian. She has nice tan, dark skin, which is lovely. And so she had us out in the sun all the time. She never put sunscreen on us. We never
Nice.
had a fear towards the sun, but it was
Good.
definitely it wasn't something like of like super high importance where it's like you need to go get your sun exposure or things like that.
Mm,
But it was definitely there. I definitely had that foundation of not fearing the sun, which was really great. We also had a really great. I also had like a really great foundation of sort of viewing the body as this energetic sort of system.
nice.
So I've slept on a magnet mattress my entire life. So it's this little magnet. It's this little mattress topper. So it's like thin like this, and then there's magnets embedded
Is it
inside.
Magnetico or no? It's
No,
different.
no, it's not. So it's if you look up if you want to really dive deep into this, my suggestion is Dr. William Philpott. He two T's at the end of Philpott, I believe. He has sort of pioneered this no, so it's North Pole magnetic therapy. So on any
Mm,
magnet, there's a North Pole and there's a South Pole. And it's the North Pole that you want. The North Pole is what stimulates increased oxygen consumption, increased sort of mitochondrial memory potential, and things like this. And it's the South Pole that can actually have sort of opposite effects that we don't want. So there's sort of a interesting sort of thing here with magnet therapy that some magnet therapy actually utilizes both, which I would consider I would see that as concerning. I would always only want
mm.
North Pole magnetic therapy. But anyway, so I've slept on a magnet mattress my entire life, magnet pillow, and so I had this idea of like energy has something to do with the body. I didn't we never My mom never like taught us like why or anything. She just told us what to do, and I listened to it. Which is great. But yeah, so around 3 years ago is when I had these strong beliefs, like vaccines. Let's take vaccines. I had very strong beliefs about vaccines, uh,
Good.
but my beliefs were just stemming from what my mom told me, and which like all great and well. But it's like if I had these strong beliefs, I really wanted to back it up and wanting to know why I had these strong beliefs. So I started diving into the literature around vaccines, but really around all topics in general around health and wellness. I really started to see like, oh my gosh, there's like a lot of science to back up a lot of stuff, like everything we were doing growing up. So, which is really awesome to see. And, started reading books, started listening to podcasts, and then started diving deep into the primary literature. How I got into light was as I think a lot of people in the space have heard the podcast. I listened to a podcast with Jack Cruz, Andrew Huberman, and Rick Rubin, the
Oh yeah.
7 hour podcast where they go deep
That's
into
a good one to start with.
yeah. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot at once. I've listened to it now. Now I've listened to it, I don't know, a handful of times over and over again. And I always take away something new from it. And hear something different from it. But I listened to that, was blown away, and started just like looking in more into light, and light life interactions. And so I started diving into literature and I fell in love with the literature. I think one because sort of like the simplicity of it. It's like very like obviously it can get very complex in terms of like the biological mechanisms, but it's also just like such a simple concept of that light like it's just so to me it was so obvious. Like obviously light has a huge role and player in human biology. Simply the fact like okay, I had this understanding of we are some sort of energetic beings and energy is very important for the human body and where the primary energy source of all life on Earth is the sun. So obviously, if the biggest energy source is interacting with just another smaller energy source, there has to be some interaction there. There has to be some relevancy there. So that was really like interesting to see and looking into literature, seeing that there's so much really awesome stuff on this. And then also the fact that it's not really talked about a whole ton, especially in the health and wellness world. Like you said, diet, exercise, you got those things checked, you're good. But there's so much more, right? Obviously, I think light's just one more thing that is very, very important. I think it's a super high importance. So that's sort of how I got into it. And then there's no going back once you start implementing it in your own life. So I was already in a healthy state. Starting to learn about the light stuff. So I didn't have any health effect like and didn't have any bad health effects going into it. But I did definitely see some improvements in terms of I would have more energy waking up. I would be more energized, wouldn't be like sluggish waking up out of bed. and things like that, which I just saw like big improvements. And obviously that ties into circadian rhythm and getting bright morning light into the eyes and going to bed with the sun and things like this. So that's sort of how I got into it.
You weren't a night owl or anything like that. You just sort of fine tuned your circadian rhythm, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I so definitely I will say during COVID, I definitely played video games.
Okay,
To be
yeah.
honest, like I wasn't like a crazy video game kid. My mom obviously like she didn't have us like that. But my mom would let us play video games stuff. And so during COVID, I definitely played video games late into the night.
Mhm.
And then but obviously, we still obviously I had all these other all these other health practices going for me that helped mitigate
I was gonna say it
definitely
didn't impact you like it does other kids because it depends on your capacity, right? It
yeah,
depends on your energetic
yep,
capacity, right? So yours
yep,
is pretty good. I mean, you're sleeping on a magnetic pole every night. Like
Yeah,
yours is
right.
good, right? So yours was less compromised. You didn't have all the toxicity of all the medications. So you're less
yeah,
compromised. So it probably didn't affect you
yeah,
as much as it would have as affects other kids. Um, yeah, because obviously that's not the best practice, but like I said, you're pretty healthy, so it wasn't as much of an impact to you.
yeah, exactly. But then again, when I did start when I stopped playing video games late into the night and went to bed early with the sun and things like that, I just saw even better improvements. Again, specifically with sort of energy levels and being more alert and less like groggy waking up. Not that I was like super groggy, but sort of I felt better.
Felt
Um,
like a zing when you get up, like,
yeah,
all right, I'm ready to go, right? Like,
exactly.
all right, let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah.